Okay, now we've been having some storms lately, and here a great big willow tree fell down and has been lying here, bits of it, by the side of the road for quite some time now. Now I need some little bits and pieces of wood of a particular shape for a project I have in mind, so I'm just going to take my loppers here and cut off some pieces that I want. Okay, that ought to do it, I reckon. So we're just going to carefully pare away the green bark. It's easier to do this when these sticks are green like this. And I'm just angling the blade so that it doesn't really cut into the wood. It's just getting underneath the bark and really just scraping the bark off. Nothing much more than that. Right, I think that'll probably do. So I've got 8 pieces, which means 16 forks. I think that'll do just nicely. So we'll stop there. I'm going to leave these to dry for probably a week, and then we'll try working with them. Now it's starting to clear up this mess. These bark shavings, well, I could just put them straight on the garden, but I'll put them in the compost and they'll rot down. Okay, now I promised I was going to do something with these fork sticks, and here it is. So the first part of this project is going to be to shorten these to about probably 5 centimeters on the forked parts, just there. I don't want to cut it too short because we're going to use these for something, but I don't want them as long as that, so I think probably 5 centimeters will do it. Now I'm going to do that by eye because I want this thing to be organic and a little bit rough and ready. I actually want a slightly irregular, well, I've already got an irregular layout by virtue of what these sticks are, so I'm going to just do this by eye. Yeah, that's going to be perfect. Good. Okay, next thing to do is going to be to get these all sanded up. For this we're going to be using an 80 grit flap wheel sander. It's pretty coarse, but actually you still can get quite a smooth finish on this just on an 80 grit because it's rotating so rapidly. If you just press lightly against that, you actually get quite a smooth finish. We will finish with some finer sandpaper obviously, and I have got some other sanding solutions for getting into the cleft there and around the awkward bits, but we'll start off by rounding these over and taking the general roughness and residue of bark off. Okay, so you get the idea. I'm not going to make you watch the whole of the sequence of me sanding all 2, 4, 6, 8 of these, but you can see that with that sanding wheel I'm able to get the bark traces off and get it down to more or less the final shape. It's still going to need some finish sanding there because it's quite a rough texture, although I don't mind because the purpose of this, because the overall feel of this is going to be a little bit rough and ready anyway. Okay, so I've got those cleaned up as much as I want to, mostly around the outside. There are just a few little bits of irregularity and bark that need cleaning up on the inside of that cleft there. So for this I'm going to use a different kind of sanding wheel. This has got some polymer bristles with abrasive grains kind of embedded in it. Now I'm going to have to go gentle with this because this will very easily cut through the wood. much as I'm going to give those, I'll give them some finish sanding, but I'm not going to bother taking off all of that bark and all of that discoloration, because actually I want to kind of embrace the natural look and feel of sticks that have been whittled. So that's pretty much as far as I'm going to go now with those. You'll notice I've got one that's different from all the others. These are all willow and this one's oak, and I think that's going to be okay. Actually, I'm going for a completely random and irregular look for this piece, so I think it's actually going to be okay that I've got a mixture of timbers here. Something like that, I think. Now they're going to need a bit more spacing actually, so I'm going to now cut a piece of hazel log to receive all of these forked pieces. So I have in my timber stack here, I've got some hazel and elder logs that have been sat in here for, well, the hazel's been here at least 18 months, probably longer. So that should be dry enough to use now. I'm going to cut a section out in the middle of it, and I think I might actually just plane it flat on one side rather than try and cut this. I think I'm going to use the electric planer to plane it flat. Nice. And then we'll do the same at the other end. Good. Now, I'm pretty sure you're not meant to do this, but I'm actually just going to fix this in the jaws of the workbench, and I'm going to plane it flat on one side with the electric planer. We'll see how well that goes. This might either work like a charm or be a total disaster. Let's get started. Okay, now it seems to be working, and you know what, I'm really liking the effect we get here where we've exposed the grain of the timber but we still retain a bit of the bark there. So I don't think we're going to use that on this particular project, but that's something to remember for the future because that looks really good. Now, I'm just going to put a straight edge against there, and I can see that it's a bit dippy in the middle, so I'll focus on the ends a bit more. Let's take a look at that. That's good because that's going to fix flat against the wall like that. That's good, yeah. So we've got half round, well, no, 3/4 round. That's good. Now this bark here, I think we'll keep most of it, but I'm going to go over it with the flat wheel to take off all the rough stuff. So for this bit, I'm just going to hold it down, I think, and just run the flat wheel across it because I just want to get rid of this flaky outer bark, but I don't want to remove the whole of the finish. Don't want to remove the whole of the bark layer. Okay, so this next part can only really be done pretty much by hand with a bit of trial and error. What we're going to do is take a spade bit, we're going to drill diagonally in through here, either coming out into this back flat section or stopping short, and then we're going to set these into the wood. Now these are all different diameters, so I'm going to have to choose spade bits which are slightly smaller than my sticks, and then whittle the sticks down so that they wedge in there nice and tight. Okay, so we're going to go in at sort of that angle. Now the angles, I'm going to do the angles a bit differently as well, so that it gives it a bit more of that rustic organic feel, and also because it's impossible to get this exactly right, so I might as well get it deliberately wrong. I think I'm actually going to leave those as stopped holes. Okay, now you'll notice I've kept my pegs laid out in order at the back there, and that's an important point because they are all different diameters and they've got to fit into these holes. So let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, one in first. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the oak one, and it's got to go into that hole there. So we'll measure the depth of the hole, and that's how much I need to allow. Now I don't want to go right up to that bit there, I want to leave maybe that much sticking out, so I need that much peg to there. So I'm going to say there, that's my cut-off point right there, and that gives me that much in the wood, that much sticking out, and my pegs on the end. Okay, so let's get that cut to length, and then we can whittle it to fit in the socket. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it's going to go into that hole there, that way up, because there's a slight lift on there. Let's have a look. No, actually, no, I think we'll go that way up. Yeah, that's fine. So now I've just got to whittle that down a little bit. I could use the disc sander, I suppose, or the flat wheel sander, but I think my ears have had enough assault today, so we're probably just going to whittle that with the little knife. I think that will get us to where we need to be. And I will make it slightly tapered because I want it to wedge in there really nice and tight. Now, if we wanted to wedge these in so tight they will never come out, we could do something called fox wedging, where we split the edge of, we cut a slot in the end of this piece here, and we put a wedge in there so that when it hammers home, the wedge opens it out, and it'll never come out then. You'd have to drill it out. But I don't think we need to do that. I think shaving it down will be fine. Okay, so I've got a little bit of glue here. I need something to spread the glue with, so I think we'll just make ourselves a little spreader out of one of those sticks that we cut off. That'll do. And then we're going to spread glue inside the hole, I think, and then it won't squirt out all over the outside. Put a nice big blob right down the end. Should be good. Right, let's get that glue out of the way, knife out of the way. Open it up a little bit to hold that. And then we're just going to push that down. And if it needs any knocking into place, I've got mullets that I made. There we go. That's pretty good. Okay, I'm not going to make you sit through the rest of these. I'll show you when we've got all of these in. It's going to be the same principle. Whittle it down, make it fit the hole, glue it in place. It couldn't be simpler. Yeah, the willow is much easier to whittle than the oak was. That's good. Okay, that's the last one, so just a little bit of clean up of glue. Tiny bit of squeeze out there where I went through. Okay, so I'm really happy with that, actually. I think that's going to look good. So we've just got to wait for the glue to dry now, and then we'll give it a final sand and some varnish. Okay, so let's just catch up with where we got to. All of the pegs are fitted and glued in place now. The glue is set. I drilled some stopped holes there and drilled some smaller holes all the way back. So these will be the two mounting screw holes that we use to fix this to the wall. And then I cut some little pegs just off of spare pieces of stick that I had, which I will sand the ends of these round, and when we put the screws in there I'll just drive those in there ready to cover the screw heads. So we're ready to finish this now. So we're going to give it some wipe on poly, which I'm just going to sponge on with a sponge applicator. And give that a good shake. And pour some of that out in a pot, because it'll be easier to work with out of a pot than the bottle. So, starting at one end, I'm just going to do the wipe on poly, and as I expected, this finish is really bringing out the character of that sanded bark. We'll probably have to give it about 3 or 4 coats of this maybe, and we'll sand back in between each coat, because the finish on the wood still isn't exactly perfect, and it's not going to be perfect. There are some little furry bits where the timber was just difficult to sand because it's willow and it has got a bit of a furry, fibrous nature to it. So what we're going to find is after the first coat of varnish there'll be some little bits sticking up, but sanding will get those back, and then subsequent finishes will deal with the rest. And we'll probably need a bit more on the end grain as well. The trick with this is just to apply it as evenly as possible, really. Thin coats with a little bit of sanding in between. Better than one great big thick coat. So the good thing with the wipe on poly finish is we'll just go over it now, and any little bits where we see a blobby run of the finish we can just wipe it off when the rest of the finish is half dry, and so we can avoid any runs and blobby bits. I don't think there's very many at this stage, so we've done all right there. So let's just have a really close look at that grain. Well, it's not exactly grain, this is the finish of sanded bark that's been then varnished. And isn't that pretty? I mean, isn't that really interesting to look at, all the different layers that have come through where I've sanded it there. this wipe-on poly, the first coat, is almost dry now, so I'm going to get another couple of coats on there, and then we'll leave it to dry overnight, and then we'll give it one finish coat, and then it should be ready to go. So there we are, that's the finished article. This is my coat rack made entirely from foraged materials that I just picked up in hedgerows, and by the side of the road there was a fallen tree, and I've converted it into a nice coat rack. So the screw holes are just covered up with these little wooden pegs that are hammered into place, and there was a little bit of concern over whether these would be strong enough, but it's willow, so it's actually very, very pliable, and I think worst case scenario, if we snap one of these off, I can just drill it out and put a new one in. So I guess the thing to do now is just test if it works. So here we go, hang a coat on it. There we are. Smash him. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.